Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the webinar Prevention is Better Than a Cure, Strengthening Biosecurity in Livestock and Aquaculture in Latin America and the Caribbean. My name is Alicia Gallardo. I'm a fisheries specialist at the FAO Regional Office for Latin America and the Caribbean. Today, I will be chairing this seminar together with my colleague Felipe Torres, who is an expert in animal health. This event is being broadcast in Spanish with simultaneous interpretation into English and Portuguese from the website of FAO Americas, from FAO's YouTube channel, and from the Twitter account at FAO Americas. As remember, you can always use the chat pod if you're properly logged with your account. So let's go to our seminar. As you know, the increase and intensification of animal production has led to significant changes in the way animals are raised and managed. Well, this is meant meeting the growing demand for animal products. We have to feed 9 billion people by 2050, so animal protein is extremely important for food security. However, there are challenges in terms of animal health, and because the emergence of endemic, emerging and transboundary diseases, particularly zoonotic diseases and those that restrict production and trade. Therefore, we need to do something. The region is still in the process of recovering from a deep socioeconomic crisis. So we have to face these diseases outbreaks in a timely manner so as to avoid fragility and an effect on food security. Many of those of us living in Latin America and the Caribbean live on these small scale productions. In order to address these challenges, it is essential to adopt sound biosecurity practices at different levels, the country and the zone or a farm level, and promote sustainable and resilient animal production management. So how do we get ready for a better biosecurity in Latin America and the Caribbean? What impact could the emergence of serious diseases have on food and nutrition security and the livelihoods of populations that depend on these activities? What strategies may be implemented in order to address health risks in the context of climate change? In order to address these questions and to discuss about this topic, we will invite our experts. We'll call upon our experts. And for that, today we have a top-level specialist panel, whom I may now introduce. Our first speaker is Victoria Aldei. She's Director of Biosecurity, Broodstock Programs and Research and Development at NACWA in Saudi Arabia. We'll then have a video clip from Melba Reantazo. She's the Aquaculture Officer and Biosecurity Expert at the international level. She's from FAO HQ, who will be represented by Andrea Dallocco, who is an officer from her group in FAO Rome. We'll also have Leopoldo del Barrio, who is FAO coordinator for antimicrobial resistance, and Una Salud. Melissa McLaws, she's a risk management specialist with FAO, and Alejandro Rivera, who is an animal health specialist with FAO, and Andres Gonzalez, our sustainable livestock, animal health, and biodiversity officer, who will summarize these webinar. So I'd like to thank all these panel members and all of you joining this event, which will have the following format. Each panel member will have a 10-minute presentation on his or her vision and work related to biosecurity in aquaculture and livestock. Then I'll invite, again, the audience to ask your questions in the chat box, or using the hashtag Mejor Producción in social media. So let me start with Victoria Alde. She is a leader in biosafety in aquaculture. She's a proud mother, a wonderful professional, and she's the chair of the biosecurity group in the implementation of the biosecurity tool. That's the PMP TAB, which is the Progressive Management Pathway for Terrestrial and Animal Biosecurity. She will address challenges of biosecurity. So, Victoria, you have the floor, and I will let you know when you have to end your presentation. So, Victoria, you are recognized. So, welcome, and thank you for the kind introduction and for the invitation. Can you see my screen? Okay. What's biosecurity in aquaculture? There are several definitions out there, but the one I like the best is the one within the FAO project that Alicia just referred to, the PMP for aquaculture. Says biosecurity is the risk management from pathogenic agents in a cost-effective manner through an industrial, national, international, and strategic approach with the shared public and private responsibilities. That is, biosecurity is managing risks from pathogenic agents. It needs to be cost-effective, and the approach should be industrial, national, and international, and share responsibility, both public and private. So biosecurity, it's not just excluding pathogens, but combining strategies focused on the greatest risk, those that may have an important economic impact, and our biosecurity measures have to be cost effective. We cannot go to a cost that the cost will prevent its application. So this is a depiction of what we do. We work at the animal level, the environment level. I'm sorry, and at the pathogen level. At the animal level, we worked on SPF status, pathogen-free, genetics tolerance, resistant, at the epigenetics, the expression of certain genes, vaccines, nutritional status. At the environment level, we have the husbandry or well-being or welfare. It's more productivity, less stress, better health. For infrastructure, what's the load capacity, aerators, feed, soil management. We look at diagnostic pathogenesis, cleaning and disinfections, the dry out. That's at the pathogen level. So within those fields, we do it at the farm, at the national, at the international level, and all of that within an economic framework, cost effective, and the goal of biosecurity, it's protecting the benefit of the production or the business. unless we protect such benefit or such investment, then we can hardly convince producers to implement biosecurity strategies. I'll be elaborating on the Saudi Arabian example. We were farming shrimps around 10 and 15,000 tons. That was production. 2011, we had white spot, and for 2 years we addressed uh, different strategies from Latin America and Asia. None of them was successful. Our environmental conditions are very different, high salinity, extreme temperatures. So we added a completely new strategy. We changed the species. We went for SPF that were we'd had this tolerance for a white spot, which allowed for an exponential growth in production. More importantly, PPP was the public-private partnership, probably the most important aspect. There was this Saudi Aquaculture Society and the government. The government understood that the more interested party is the business, because they're risking the money, they're risking the investment. So the responsibility in implementing biosecurity was transferred to the Saudi Aquaculture Society, or SAS. The knowledge on biosecurity and production, in many cases, is in the industry rather than the government. The government has the authority, so if they can work together defining strategies and defining laws, then the government will contribute with the authority, while the private sector will contribute with the knowledge. These are the various points implemented nationally. A national reference diagnostic laboratory was established, did a list of pathogens we wanted to exclude, including everything from OIE plus other pathogens. National surveillance system was implemented for endemic and emerging pathogens, farm and wild samples, as well as market samples, both local and imported. Each animal movement had a health certificate. The country was zoned and was divided into compartments to regulate the movement of animals. There is a mandatory reporting of disease outbreaks, which leads to an emergency response, which means that a technical group from the Aquaculture Society will go and take samples, run a diagnosis, and support. If it's an infectious risk for the rest of the industry, then it will stay there until a decision is made whether to eliminate those animals or not. Any import of animals requires an approved supplier. There is a quarantine and testing upon reception. No wild broodstock allowed for commercial production, only for genetic programs. And then certain restrictions on aquatic products based on the SPS agreement of the WTO was implemented. Then there were every 4 years we have workshops of sharing the information on monitoring and productivity of businesses. At industry level, we changed the species. We went to an SPF strategy and white spot tolerant. We implemented a viral exclusion strategy at the NBC, so we did exclusion from maturation and larviculture. They excluded pathogen carriers. So we filter the water, and that depends on the culture phase. So the older the animal, less filtration is needed. When we do a transfer at different stages, we run PCR to make sure they are free. We sample for all the pathogens described, not only OIE. We have PCR and histology monitoring, including wild populations. We observe the syndromic surveillance. We look at productivity values. For instance, the eclosion rate will, if it decreases, we investigate the causes, or food conversion factor will, that increases, we do an investigation. Productivity values are very important as a health indicator, so we can detect diseases before a severe outbreak. We also have a diagnostic laboratory, an emergency response, a contingency plan, so on and so forth.
Now, clarifying the SPF concept, there's significant confusion. And there's a publication done with the support of FAO, in which a set of experts were invited to define SPF, specific pathogen free. And the definition we agree upon is that a population that is negative to specific pathogens for at least 2 years in a row. They have been grown under biosecurity measures in a high biosecurity facility. They have been fed with biosafe food, and this requires a surveillance program with PCR and histology for validation. Although the SPF concept is clear, how to get to that SPF condition is what's complex. So we talk about specific pathogens. We don't mean all pathogens. So it will depend on the grower of the SPF animals, what pathogens are included in that list. For example, there are some producers that only cover pathogens listed by OIE. For example, we believe all pathogens that are known should be included because any pathogens may have a physiological cost for the animal. It also says that there has to be a set of biosecurity measures in a biosecure facility. We cannot define this because it will depend, for example, a facility that is near the shore it requires a much more stringent set of biosecurity facilities compared to one that's on the desert. And biosafe food, they do not exist in the case of shrimp. We're still using fresh, frozen animal products. It also requires a surveillance program. We have not defined frequency, samples, or techniques in order to get those samples. When, for example, when we discuss the growing program as a part of our biosecurity approach, is to work on disease tolerance. Our program of growing these species has 4 components. The first one is the health condition, which is SPF, as I just described. The facilities and procedures up to the seeding or the larvae, they're all free of pathogens. We look for optimizing the growing and performance conditions optimization. So at each growing stage, survival should be above 85%. If it is below 85%, we consider that the animals may be impacted when expressing their genetic potential. It has a genetic selection component. We use the blood system, and one of the biggest criteria will be the molecular markers is what we are using, and the rest is epigenetic. We may have the genes, but we need them to be expressed, and we are starting to understand that an animal may have the genes in order to tolerate the white spot, but they are not expressed. We also use epigenetic genetics with heat shock proteins, HSP, of thermal stress or heat shock. So it's like causing fever in the animal. So in the case of shrimp, we expose them during the larval stage to a certain temperature for a few minutes, and this is how we count the number of days they survive. And this is how these thermal stress proteins express themselves. That have a resistance to stress, to heat stress situations, for example, reduced oxygen, high ammonia, or infectious diseases. And we know that that is also transgenerational. We know that if we do it in the brood stocks, that expression of those proteins will also take place in the following generations. Excuse me, Victoria, you have 1 minute left. Thank you. Yes, I'm about to close. For example, in these bars, you see the results for survival when we expose each family in the genetic program to white spots. So from here, we choose everything that survives more than 70%. And here in red, what you see is how survival improves in these families when we are exposing them to this fever, to this heat shock. So with this, I'm done. And let me explain that biosecurity, we need to work at all levels. We need to work at the animal level, at the pathogen level, and also at the environmental level. Thank you very much. That's it. Thank you. Thank you for your excellent presentation. So clear, Victoria. Well, in fact, Victoria mentioned some important elements. Did you know that animal well-being is part of biosecurity? So Victoria showed how animals can express naturally and therefore also be more resistant to disease. Also, Victoria talked about the importance of PPP, of private-public partnership, to strengthen biosecurity so that it multiplies in the different farms and the different areas of the country. She also talked about indicators. That is to say, in order to monitor biosecurity, we need to follow key indicators in order to assess the efficacy of a plan at a farm level. And finally, she left us with some homework in terms of the importance of listed diseases, introducing pathogens that are very important for country and may not be listed internationally to address all risks. So we have a first approach which is very comprehensive, reinforcing the concept of biosecurity and also minimizing the risk of introduction and propagation of pathogens into aquaculture farms or livestock farms and also into countries. Okay, great. We're going to continue now. Let me invite you now to watch a video sent by our colleague Melba Reantazo. She's also a leader with significant contributions to animal health, aquatic animals. She has worked a lot with small growers in Africa and Asia, helping them keep their production sustainability and to be able to feed themselves. Melba is a proud mum and a proud grandmother as well. She's a leader of the PMP AB animal, the biosafe biosecurity progressive pathway so that countries implement this idea. So I'm going to ask the team now to show Melba's video.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Melba Riantaso. I am team leader of Food Safety, Nutrition and Health at the Fisheries and Aquaculture Division of FAO. The Progressive Management Pathway for Improving Aquaculture Biosecurity, or PMPAB, is a new initiative that FAO and partners are promoting. The PMPAB is an extension of FAO's Progressive Control Pathways approach, which has been internationally adopted to assist countries develop risk mitigation strategies that reduce or prevent losses from major livestock diseases. Whereas most PCPs focus on control of specific diseases, the PMPAB focuses on diseases faced by aquaculture at the commodity and enterprise levels. PMP-AB refers to a pathway aimed at enhancing aquaculture biosecurity capacity by building on existing frameworks, capacity, and appropriate tools using risk-based approaches and public-private sector partnership. You will see here the 4 stages. And stage 1, biosecurity strategy or risk is defined. Stage 2, biosecurity systems implemented. Stage 3, enhanced biosecurity support national aquaculture sector. Pathway, the following outcomes are expected: reduce disease burden, improve health at farm and national levels, minimize global spread of diseases, optimize socio-economic benefits from aquaculture, attract investment opportunities into aquaculture, and achieve One Health goals. In the context of PMP, aquaculture biosecurity refers to the cost-effective management of risks posed by infectious agents to aquaculture through a strategic approach at enterprise national and international levels with shared public and private responsibilities. Each stage has key indicators and activities, and biosecurity action plans, which are commodity based, serve as gateway passes to move from one stage to another. This slide shows all the essential elements of any aquatic animal health protection program. They are all shown here, and this was developed by FAO back in the year 2000 during a regional project for 21 countries in Asia. National strategic planning on aquatic health management and biosecurity is vital to reduce the vulnerability in the aquatic sector to new and emerging diseases and the often ad hoc and reactive response to serious transboundary aquatic diseases and mass mortality events in aquatic populations. The development of the national strategy is a first step in the process and a requirement in the PMP-AB approach. What you can see here are the four scenarios which gives any country at any stage of aquaculture development or whatever competence they have an entry point to PMP. For example, scenario one, these are countries with no aquaculture biosecurity strategy but with aquaculture or starting with aquaculture. Scenario two, these are countries with existing strategies, some level of implementation. How can this be used, built on, revised and expanded to fit the context of PMPAB. Scenario 3, these are countries with advanced biosecurity strategies. What bottlenecks, lessons, and good practices can be used and updated to fit the context of PMPAB. And scenario 4 are countries whose aquaculture biosecurity is dependent on the biosecurity situation in neighboring countries due to shared water bodies, watersheds, or coastlines, and where a regional or sub-regional aquaculture biosecurity strategy is needed or already exists. What I would like to emphasize in the next few slides is that there are two important elements that are present in all stages of the PNPAB. These are risk assessment and emergency preparedness. So let us look at risk analysis first. The general framework for risk analysis developed by OIE typically consists of four major components: hazard identification, risk assessment, risk management, and risk communication. This tool can be combined with value chain analysis to identify and prioritize the points along the value chain and the major pathways of spread that may pose the greatest risk for disease transmission prior to implementing control measures. Emergency preparedness is the ability to respond effectively and in a timely fashion to disease outbreaks, mass mortalities, and fish kills. The capability to deal with emergency disease situations requires a great deal of planning and coordination, including establishing operational, financial, and legislative mechanisms and making available required resources such as skilled personnel, essential equipment, and advanced emergency fund. PMP works for moving countries forward in a guidance context. Each stage provides a tangible benefit to stakeholders, and it will be part of the work within each stage to demonstrate, communicate, and advocate for activities that solve challenges inherent in retaining commitment. Stages can be considered as an elevator where you get on at your floor and stop at the floor, which has the needs for your aquaculture industry. But everyone is in the same biosecure building, which help global communication and share experiences as everyone's aquaculture biosecurity progresses. Biosecurity progress at all levels is a good news story. Disease prevention is an aquaculture strength that benefits the sector itself, wild resources, and the environment. Co-management approach, greater use of planning processes that brings stakeholders together is one of the benefit of PMPAB. It provides a solid platform for public-private sector partnership as PMPAB implementation plans should be developed between industry stakeholders and governance authorities to ensure buy-in best fit for country, but a template that provides a degree of consistency between participating countries or region. It promotes risk ownership, active engagement, and long-term commitment to risk management. It gives an opportunity for longevity sufficiently responsive to environmental and anthropological challenges, enabling policy environments and adoption of sound aquaculture production practices. Let us now look at how PMPAB is being rolled out or implemented. Since its initiation in 2018, several multi-stakeholder meetings, establishment of the official PMPAB Technical Working Group, several technical meetings, and endorsement and support by three consecutive sessions of the FAO Committee on Fisheries, Subcommittee on Aquaculture, 10th, 11th, and 12th sessions, the guidance for application document has been completed. The guidance document provides information on the vision, mission, scope, terminology, benefits, advancement along the pathway, and the PMPAB stage descriptions. It also contains the objectives and key outcomes for each stage. The guidance document includes a number of PMPAB toolkits. The last two are still work in progress, including cost benefit analysis framework for biosecurity systems. In January, the country case study proponents met and discussed the CBA conceptual framework. Since then, the conceptual framework has been finalized and an academic paper entitled Bridging Aquatic Animal Health and Economics in the Analysis of Disease Impacts and Biosecurity Strategies in Aquaculture, a conceptual framework has been completed and it is intended to be submitted to a journal before end of the year. The second meeting of the PMPAB Technical Working Group was held in Chiang Rai, Thailand in February. The meeting finalized the PMPAB guidance document and discussed further the other PMPAB toolkits as listed here. On August 30, in collaboration with the FAO e-learning academy, the e-learning course Pathway to Aquaculture Biosecurity, Managing Disease Risks in the Aquaculture Value Chain was launched. It contains 5 lessons, namely Introduction to PMPAB, Introduction to Risk Analysis, Import Risk Analysis in the Aquaculture Value Chain, and the last lesson is on application. The e-learning was well received since its release on 30 August. 609 registered, completed the course, and 156 received a certification badge. You will see here some data on gender and learners by region, 64% coming from Asia. Regarding data of learners by type of organization, almost equal percentages from industry, academe, and 34% from the government. As mentioned earlier, one of the most important activity and requirement at stage 1 of the PMPAB is the development of a national or regional aquatic organism health strategy. Currently, FAO is assisting the network of aquaculture centers in Asia Pacific or NACA in the Lake Victoria Basin in developing their regional aquatic organism health strategies. Another available toolkit is the FAO 12-point checklist for the design and implementation of an active surveillance for diseases of aquatic organisms. This surveillance checklist has been pilot tested in several countries, as shown in this map. This educational tool presents a stepwise approach and is intended for a multidisciplinary team in developing countries that do not have formal training on surveillance and epidemiology. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Melba's video clip. There were some difficulties with the audio feed. We will try to emphasize with the questions, and then we will upload Spanish information, emphasizing the importance of the tool so that these countries can increase their biosecurity levels. There are certain points I would like to emphasize on Melba's video clip on the risk analysis. The recommendation is to carry out a risk analysis on biosecurity along the value chain. And for that, we urge you to follow the e-learning course. It's really easy to log into this course. It's 4 or 5 sessions. This program offers information on what is that we need to identify, how using the risk analysis tool that could be very useful for countries and as well as producers. So you can always use this important training tool. And yet another thing is that we have over 100 persons, 100 people following this webinar from different countries in the region. So we're very happy and very pleased with the number of attendees. This is so important to continue to talk. And biosecurity, we're learning this. It's a practical element. These may lead to better sustainability, above all, by minimizing the environmental impact when having animal production. And that will also help increasing trust from civil society and from consumers. So it is a tool allowing us to mitigate, decrease risks, which are inherent to any animal production system. So let's go on to the next presentation. We have Andrea Dallocco. He will be answering questions on this important tool. But back to our presentations. One of the challenges of biosecurity involving us all is protecting antibiotics. Now we'll go for treatment of diseases. Antibiotics, I said, antibiotics used for human medicine. For that, there's a huge challenge today for every sector, health professionals, producers, pet owners, using antibiotics in a responsible and prudent manner. For that, during the last few years, we have had a four-party alliance between FAO or WHO, OMSA, United Nations Forum for the Environment, addressing all the aspects dealing with the use of antimicrobials in order to work together and decrease the risk of resistant bacteria. It's what the Public-Private Alliance Victoria referred to. This is an alliance of international agencies in order to advance this topic. One of the practices of biosecurity considered in the biosecurity plan is the responsible and prudent use of antimicrobial. But further on to our agenda, we will have a discussion that a preventive practice is the use of vaccines in order to prevent the diseases. This is the week of of AMR, Risk Mitigation Awareness Week. That's why we will have Leopoldo del Barrio as the next speaker. He's a veterinarian with a long background in FAO and in different projects supporting the region. Has also worked from the early stages with small producers. He has just completed the UN project on mitigation of AMR, specifically in the food feed stocks. And therefore, he has played a key role in strengthening the best practices in the region. So Leopoldo is an excellent profession, a cat lover, as many of us. So Leopoldo, then you will have the floor and share with us the relationship between antimicrobial resistance and biosecurity practices. Go ahead, Leopoldo.
Muchas gracias, Alicia, por la presentación y gracias
Thank you,
también al...
Alicia, for the introduction. I'd like to thank the organizers for the invitation. In fact, I'm going to show my presentation. Can you see it, Alicia? Yes, we can see it now. Well, in fact, this brief presentation has the purpose of highlighting the biosecurity measures in production systems, especially of terrestrial and aquatic animals, as Alicia said, as part of this holistic response that antimicrobial resistance requires, or AMR.
Ahí. Bueno, esta resistencia a los antimicrobianos...
With this AMR that we know is recognized as a world health threat that is emerging, growing, and it's also urgent, that has an impact on all sectors of society because it does not discriminate among countries, higher income or lower income countries. It is considered today as one of the most severe threats to public health in this 21st century. The World Health Organization has declared it as one of the 10 most important threats to human health, to nutrition and food safety, and also for the development of the threats that society is facing today. An AMR that we know that is facing a concerning size that does not recognize geographic borders nor ecologic, because it does not discriminate among human or animal populations, and also an AMR that is labeled by the NUMA as one of the first environmental emerging problems. And of course, AMR has a huge impact on public health, of course, but it also has an impact on the sustainability of these agri-food systems, as it was said, devoted to feeding a growing world population. And on the other hand, the resilience of those livelihoods that base their activities on farming, livestock production, and of course, it does have an impact on food security because these are livelihoods that are very characteristic of our region. It is also very well known, all these prospective studies by Jim Neal that already in 2016 said that if no effective and timely measures are adopted by 2050 would be the main deaths from antimicrobial resistant infections and other causes in 2050. The impact of A and B by 2050 that could lead to 28 million people into poverty, and economic impacts at different levels, especially in food systems, of course, and health systems. So AMR is not only a health threat, but also a threat that also exacerbates inequalities among different populations. However, what has happened? In 2022, the Health and Metrics Institute of the University of Washington published a systematic analysis of the global load of bacterial resistance to antimicrobials that happened in 2019. And in summary, what were the findings? 1.27 million of human deaths a year that could be attributed to AMR. and 4.95 million of deaths associated to this antimicrobial resistance. That is to say, current data uh, are already forecasting a very complex scenario. And what happens in the Americas? Until recently, until 3 months ago, the number of deaths due to AMR was unknown. But in August 2023, also the Lancet published a study on the load of this bacterial resistance, and that showed 141,000 human deaths attributed to AMR in 35 countries in Latin America, and 569,000 human deaths associated to AMR. And this is the first estimate for the region. And of course, it is a not very promising result because there's a number of people dead accounts for a much larger number if we add this to deaths due to tuberculosis, HIV, tropical diseases such as dengue and malaria, and others that took place in this region of the Americas. And of course, it is obvious that we do not need to get to 2050 to have the evidence that AMR is a severe problem. And well, AMR is a complex threat because it has a complex epidemiological structure that makes it that the response needs to be based on a health approach that is at all levels, which is the guiding model in order to contain AMR. And that we know, after all, it's an approach in order to look for intersectorial efficient solutions. However, the response of AMR managing risks in AMR is holistic. It's broad because it responds to that complex epidemiological structure, and health measures revolve around the life cycle of the antimicrobials, that is to say, around those best use practices for antimicrobials that is not only during the production, but also a record of the antimicrobials, the application, the animals, the elimination of that, but also of a set of measures focused on reducing the need on the use of as antimicrobials, that is to say, um, in all this preventing infections. And this makes it a very complex challenge because of all these reasons. And it is in that context that OMSA promotes the prudent and responsible guidelines for the use of antimicrobials in veterinary medicine, which is a set of practical recommendations in order to improve health and well-being of animals, but at the same time to mitigate the generation propagation of AMR from livestock production systems. And here we have a set of measures that are for the adoption of those best use practices of antimicrobials, understood as those that are focused on therapeutic or medical and veterinary medicine applications. And based on that, there's a number of responsibilities and specific obligations for each one of the parties involved that must adopt actions based on AMR associated to this set of measures. However, there are also other sets of measures that are more implicit, but that are also part of these responsible measures, which are infection prevention measures that allow us to reduce the need for the use of antimicrobials. These are immunization plans, and biosecurity measures, of course, hygiene and disinfection measures, animal well-being, and also animal feedstock, particularly associated to prophylactic nutrition and substances that actually help. And this set of measures is the one that needs to be established as the first line of containment of AMR in animal production systems, and it also happens with human health systems. First, prevention, and then the use of antimicrobials, because it comes next. And that is why biosecurity is an important component of the response to AMR. These best practices programs or aquaculture best practices that have been the basic support for this healthy production of healthy animals. It is the AMR response. This intensifies the health management component of best livestock and aquaculture practices, with an emphasis on biosecurity, as it was said, systematizing this set of strategic combinations that are necessary. That is to say, the AMR response that a country defines from producing food must consider reviewing and optimizing these practices of health management with a biosecurity approach in a systematic way, and not only focusing on the use of antimicrobials. And well, where's that AMR response or country response or health response? It's structured in the national plans against AMR that are aligned with international benchmark policies, which is the main instrument of AMR public policy that is defined by a country. So, in that context, one could wonder, well, maybe the what would be the condition of this region in the context of AMR if we go through this questionnaire that is called tracks the sixth round for 2022-2023, which is a world questionnaire that follows up AMR. And by way of an example, it's a long questionnaire, discusses the animal, the human, and the environmental aspects of, for example, 4.10, which is related to biosecurity and best animal production practices for aquatic animals, that is also for terrestrial animals. Here we see in the map that there are still challenges in the region. We have countries in orange that show that system or program best practices on biosecurity that we know is public and private is developed, but there are still gaps in terms of scope, which is had to be national, in terms of training levels to really achieve effective adoption of the measures, and also surveillance and enforcement that was also mentioned that the authority needs to apply. You have, excuse me, Leopoldo, you have 1 minute.
Absolutamente. Esta es
Yes,
la
yes.
última.
This is the last one. Finally, as a message, is that the response to AMR from agri-food systems somehow has to be seen in a context that highlights animal health and also food safety. This context is where we articulate these measures in order to provide this systemic approach. Thank you. Thank you, Leopoldo, for the excellent presentation. We're going to leave comments for last. Animal health and food safety are the concepts that I'm going to rescue from Leopoldo. And I'd like to offer the floor to Felipe to keep on chairing this session. Thank you, Alicia. It's a pleasure to be with you, and it's an honor to chair next to you. Thank you, Leopoldo, for your presentation. And we could also maybe get some lessons from this. We could say that AMR is recognized as a world threat to public health in the 21st century. It does not discriminate among animal or human populations. AMR generates an impact on public health and on sustainability of agri-food systems, so obviously impacting food safety. An important piece of information, quite shocking, is that by 2050, AMR would be the main cause of death. Economic and social impact studies show that 28 million people would enter into poverty. So we do not need to see it only as a health threat, but also that it needs to be understood and studied from the point of view of social drivers. Estimates in the region account for 141,000 deaths, human deaths attributed to AMR in 35 countries, and 595,000 deaths associated to AMR in 35 countries. The approach is the guiding principle to address AMR, to find intersectorial and efficient measures in the face of this epidemiological and complex model of AMR. Finally, something very interesting that we can mention is that animal well-being should be able to face this problem. although antimicrobial medications perform a fundamental role in the treatment of disease and in order to protect human health as well animal disease, when they're used wrongly in order to try to prevent diseases in the livestock and aquaculture sector or in farming production, we run the potential risk of the appearance and propagation of these resistant microorganisms. Thank you, Leopoldo, and you're leaving us with good food for thought. Let's go on now about the importance of biosecurity in livestock. A very important piece of information that we'd like to share is that the livestock sector contributes with 46% of the GDP in Latin America, and it represents an important support for most vulnerable communities in the region. Let's now offer the floor to our panelist, Melissa McLaws. She will discuss about the progressive management pathway for biosecurity in terrestrial animals. Melissa, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Just let me get my... Do you see my slides correctly?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for having me here today. My name is Melissa McLaws, and I'm a veterinary epidemiologist. I work with the FAO team at headquarters on the progressive management pathway for terrestrial animal biosecurity. So we've already heard a fair bit about biosecurity today, but I think similar to the other presenters, I would like to start with the definition of biosecurity, because one thing that we have found in working in this area is that the word biosecurity means different things to different people. So within the PMP tab, the Progressive Management Pathway for Terrestrial Animal Biosecurity, we define biosecurity as a strategic and integrated approach that encompasses policy and regulatory frameworks to analyze and manage the relevant risks to human, animal, and plant life and health, as well as associated risks to the environment. And the Progressive Management Pathway for Terrestrial Animal Biosecurity has been developed as a pathway for countries to make improvements to achieve healthy, sustainable, and resilient livestock sector. It's a fairly new pathway compared to the aquaculture pathway. And here we have a brochure that has recently been published, and we will be pleased to share the link with you. The Spanish version is not yet published, but it will be very soon. So the FAO has many years of experience in developing and implementing projects related to terrestrial animal biosecurity, including disease-specific progressive control pathways for foot-and-mouth disease, PPR, for risk management at live animal and live bird markets, producing risk assessments and specific training material and guidelines to assist with these efforts. And the PMP tab has been developed as an umbrella framework that brings together these existing tools and approaches in a non-disease specific approach, and providing a pathway for countries to follow to make sustainable improvements in biosecurity. It's just been elaborated this year, and so it's new compared to the PMP AB, aquaculture. But it's been developed taking the most successful approaches from the various projects that FAO has implemented over the years. And it works on two levels. First, at the value chain level, to make improvements in the practices for different actors along the value chain, from the input through production, trading, and even to the consumer, and also at the national level to have an enabling environment with supportive policies and capacities in order to support those changes at the value chain level. So getting started with the PMP tab, similar to the aquaculture pathway, we start with a rapid situation assessment and defining minimum biosecurity standards. So we would set up a guiding group, both at national and local levels, composed of public and private stakeholders. We would conduct a rapid assessment of the biosecurity situation and the context. So this is doing a mapping of stakeholders, compiling information from existing knowledge about previous studies or approaches that might have been done, and conducting a legislative and policy review to understand what the regulations are that might support this. And we would draft minimum biosecurity standards for the sectors that are going to be targeted by the pathway. So for example, we have a fictitious country that we'll call Alpha Country, and we would hold a national stakeholder consultation to select the district and the sector which is the priority to improve biosecurity. And then we would draft minimum biosecurity standards suitable for that target sector. So in this example, in Alpha Country, through a national stakeholder consultation, we're going to work in this IOTA district on a particular sector. And then here's an example of what the biosecurity checklist might look like. So this was developed in a recent visit to Tanzania, where we're working in the pig sector. And we've developed a list of good practices you can see here in the second column, as well as specific examples of what compliance with that practice might look like. So in this first column, we say that there's no visitors allowed without permission, and different ways to comply with that, with different levels of effectiveness, might be that there's a functioning fence around the perimeter, there's a lockable gate, or maybe there's just a sign including restricted access. And these symbols here indicate how that particular indicator can be evaluated, whether it's by looking at it, or by checking for the book, or by speaking to the producer. So there would be a level of auditing of this checklist that would be done by the public sector, and then this is how they would assess it. Here's another example of a checklist. This one is taken from Uganda, focused on poultry health, particularly at slaughter. And here again, we have a list of good practices. And this is a list of the legislation that underpins those good practices. So this is the result of the policy and legislative review. We can come up and demonstrate that these good practices are underpinned by legislation. At this first step of the PMP tab, we also would take field visits to assess the biosecurity situation, checking that our checklist is appropriate and suitable, and having meetings and discussions with stakeholders, such as these focus group discussions that we're undertaking. These are again pictures from Tanzania. And from the focus group discussion, we would also have a good understanding about the reality on the ground in terms of the business models, which is really important to be able to understand what is feasible from the stakeholders' point of view to improve biosecurity. So this is a business model canvas that we made from the focus group findings in Tanzania, where in discussing with farmers, we can understand who their key partners are that they need to do their business, what are their business activities and the resources available to them. The value propositions explains what value they add to their product, what is their unique offering to the consumers, information about their customer relations, the channels by which they both receive and communicate information that they need to do their business, and the different segments along the value chains that they need to do their work. And we also look at the costs and revenue streams. And these are really important to understand what resources they might have available to invest in biosecurity, if any, because we want the model, the improvements, the intervention for biosecurity to be sustainable and feasible. So the next step along the PMP tab is to co-create and then implement a local level pilot program to improve biosecurity. And this intervention is designed through a public-private dialogue and partnership, and again, focusing on business compatible solutions. So it involves, the pilot is designed through a dialogue between the public sector and the private sector, taking into account the business models and realities of the private sector business, as well as the capacity for it to be supported by the public sector, whether it's through extension or training activities or auditing and the compliance with the checklist. And we're always looking for an incentive for the private actors to implement the checklist, which might be expected improvements in production, or perhaps if they comply with the checklist in a demonstrated audited manner, they would be certified, and then that would give them access to additional markets that uncertified producers don't have.
Melissa,
Yes.
Melissa, you have 1 minute to finish your presentation, please.
Okay, no problem. So here's an example for Uganda, very quickly, where the checklist was implemented, and you can see that the level of compliance is progressively improving. And this was achieved without any investments provided by external funds. The third step is to expand it based on the lessons learned. So from the Iota district, we take the lessons learned and we expand out to other districts or perhaps other nodes within the value chain. And so with that, I'd like to conclude. I hope that this was a good introduction to the PMP tab, and I would be happy to answer any questions if time allows. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Melissa, por tu presentación.
Thank you, Melissa, for your presentation. This issue is of crucial importance, taking into account that most of the growers are small-scale farmers, often women, who rely mainly on family labor and have limited resources to implement preventive measures for the introduction of diseases that impact animal production. Something we could emphasize as key points, of course, as is that biosecurity is a strategic and integrated approach, not only parameters that can work in isolation. Biosecurity is a path for countries to achieve resilient production. PMP tab is the general framework with aspects to have a biosecurity with successful approaches. And of course, is a well-defined process which interrelates with the local, national, and public and private stakeholder groups. Let me take this opportunity to say that among our platforms, we have nearly 200 attendees in this workshop in all 3 languages, Spanish, English, and Portuguese. Thank you all for joining us today. Next, we'll have Alejandro Rivera, who will address risk communication and biosecurity in small producers. So Alejandro, you have the floor. Thank you. Thank you for your kind introduction. I would like to thank the coordinators of the webinar for the invitation. Let me share this presentation. You let me know whether you have you can see my presentation. Use the presentation mode.
Alejandro, arriba donde dice configuración.
Alejandro, right on top, where you see configuración de visualización.
Voy a hacerlo de nuevo, discúlpenme la...
Let me redo this, if I may.
Hay una pantalla que te Andrés González, me disculpan que me aparece.
Apologies, I keep getting the same screen. Can't see mine, actually.
Bueno, hasta que Alejandro pues pueda compartirnos
While
su...
we wait for Alejandro, I would like to tell our participants that we will have interaction. And that's an interesting surprise that will allow all of us to collect interesting data and of course a greater interaction for you to be part of this event. So we hope, please stay until the end so that you can figure out what the surprise will be. How can you see my presentation now?
Alejandro, en la parte superior tenemos el configuración
Alejandro, right on top, we have display set up.
No la logro encontrar, discúlpeme.
Apologies, just can't find it.
No hay problema, Alejandro. Podríamos continuar con la presentación.
No problem, Alejandro. Just maybe we could use that display.
Perfecto. Ahí está perfecto, Alejandro.
Right on, perfect. Apologies for this problem. Well, let me share with you two topics, risk communications and biosecurity in small producers. Let me discuss three concepts of risk communication: a definition of communication, the origin, what's the purpose of risk communications, and what are the communication strategies, always from the point of view of communicating risks in order to improve biosecurity. We need to remember, as discussed before, this risk communications is part of the risk analysis, which is a methodology to estimate likelihood of occurrence of a hazard and consequences, with the four components, which is hazard identification, risk assessment, risk management, together with risk communication. And these may be defined as the exchange of information, recommendations, and opinions among experts and technicians, and those people or stakeholders facing the threat or a risk for survival, health, economic, and social well-being. In this case, for
Bueno, hemos tenido un problema con...
Unfortunately, we had a problem with Alejandro. We will wait until he can join the session back. Let me take the opportunity and like to Thank you for joining us, and of course, ask your question using the different channels. Remember, your question should let us know who you are asking the question. And as I said, we have a very interesting tool which we would like to share with you so that you can a more dynamic interaction. I ask you to answer a question through Menti, which is an online platform that allows us to interact with you as an audience. You can join using your mobile phone, so using the code or www or menti.com and using the code 25161450. Again, each one of you can log into the Menti platform using the QR code or the www.menti.com and the code 25161450. We'll give you a couple of seconds so that you can start and actually use and interact with this tool.
Felipe,
Alicia.
hay algunas preguntas que mientras tanto ustedes, una sobre los pequeños
There are
productores.
certain questions on small producers and how can they implement biosecurity. So we'll try to communicate with we'll try to send these questions to Alejandro using the WhatsApp so that he can answer those questions. So let's go on to Menti, and the question we would like to ask you, it's what is the single most important challenge in terms of biosecurity for sustainability of aquaculture and livestock production? Remember, you will have a table with the different options so that you can answer, you can click on the answer, on your answer.
Pues vamos viendo que ya tenemos algunos resultados
we do have some interesting results already. Of course, training, which is important, knowledge management. It's quite an effective tool for implementing biosecurity measures. Biosecurity is not only the application, the physical application, but also the improvement of knowledge of each one of us as professionals as well as producers. Well, a lack of information is showing up, and biosecurity, it's an important concept, and we need to reach our producers. We need to consider social drivers to establish our procedures of communication so that the message is clear and effective. Alicia, how do you feel? No, it's really interesting. Human behavior, it's one of the things you learn with experience. The people must be involved and believe that biosecurity practices are good. And that's a way to communicate, especially small producers, like Alejandro was explaining. It's interesting, Felipe, how these skills, which are not technical in nature, how do you feel about that? Wonderful. Let's biosecurity in terms of in aquaculture as well as in livestock production. It's that part of the criteria and practices, the ancestral practices, ancient practices we received from our small producers. Lots of interesting aspects there as well. Trust, which we discussed before. Training costs is also showing in there. It's interesting. The implementation of biosecurity measures is not does not mean necessarily high investment. There are minimal practices guaranteeing biosafety. But I believe it's interesting, Alicia. We see there AMR, use of antimicrobial, antibiotics, the awareness we need around AMRs. How interesting this word cloud shows lots of tools in order to think about biosecurity. Yes, and legal strength. I mean, this is not should not only be best practices, but also public policies, like you say, Felipe. Critical points. We don't have to implement everything in the plan, but we need a risk approach, and costs are justified. I mean, there is a cost benefit approach, right? Let's continue to see how the word cloud is growing. And let me take the opportunity to answer some of the questions we received over the chat pod. We have a question for Melissa. Says, reads, those guidelines, best practice guidelines, are they applicable in our region? Is it possible to escalate those results as forecast for Latin America and the Caribbean? Melissa, if you could help us with that answer. Thank you for the question.
The PMP tab is not intended to be prescriptive. It doesn't dictate exactly, what should be done. And so I think that the approach of understanding the situation and then building biosecurity from the bottom up, starting with pilot projects, can be applicable in any region. And the approach can be modified as needed for the situation, not only the geographic situation, but also the sector in which it's being applied, whether it's poultry or pigs or cattle, or even at the One Health interface, with wildlife value chains. And so it's meant to be a very flexible approach that can be applied anywhere. I hope that helps to answer your question.
Thank you very much, Melissa. Una pregunta para Victoria acerca
For
de...
Victoria now, on the use, examples of in technology innovations that can help in implementing biosecurity measures according to the experience. Are they very expensive? That's a question they're asking. Thank you, Victoria. Artificial intelligence is being applied in aquaculture in order to have accurate in terms of animal counts, biomass estimate, which you can feed better. You have two main benefits: reducing production costs when feeding better. There's feed accounts for 60% of production, and then you improve water quality. That's quite clear. And you're not misusing the food; it's not remains at the bottom. You have better growing conditions. So the artificial intelligence, such as acoustic feeders, feeding up on demand, counts, accurate counts. That is improving greatly the practices and benefits for producers. It's cost effective. The payback is very short. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, Alicia. Thank you, Victoria. Very interesting and makes us think, of course. Okay, we are about the end, and let me now invite Andres Gonzalez. He's a sustainable livestock and animal health officer. Andres, you have the floor. Thank you, Alicia and Felipe, for chairing this webinar. Let me start. I'd like to thank over 200 participants from Latin America and the Caribbean joining this session. For us, it's always great to have or to facilitate these fora to disseminate key information for production in the region. Then, this webinar has been unprecedented opportunity. We talked about interaction and collaboration, but we hardly see technical teams from aquaculture, fishing, and livestock or land animals work together for something affecting both industries and all the value chains, such as biosecurity. So the lesson here is that the integration and collaboration starts at home. And this is the kind of initiative that will allow us to have useful information in the various industries, both aquaculture, livestock. I mean, that's a possibility to combine. Then, refer to the presentations, which again, I'd like to congratulate and commend each one of the speakers for their valuable collaborations. It is quite clear then that animal protein production will be more and more challenging, not only because of the mass, the volume needs to be produced in order to feed a growing human population, but also for production conditions where the use of natural resources is to be more efficient, less natural resources to produce more, and then the conditions to produce quality food, safe food to contribute to the diet of these growing number of humans as we forecast on this planet. So this is where innovation plays a critical role, because this optimization of resources and the more effective and efficient use of what we have available is innovation, and science will support us. And Victoria was elaborating on that on aquaculture, where you can really see how biosecurity and innovative practices will actually improve production and profitability. Clearly, it is impossible to convince producers to use biosecurity practices unless we show them profitability impact. So this is an incentive which speaks aloud, far beyond public policies or motivation strategies. Profitability and improvement in production and productivity of the various units. Then let me offer a general comment on PMP, both for terrestrial and aquatic animals. I mean, this progressive management pathway process. I mean, we should address them together, emphasizing the advantages, and one of them is we can have all the stakeholders involved around the same table. I mean, this is a value chain approach. You don't stop on production. You don't just focus on production, but it includes the whole value chain. And above all, more importantly, this is what was one of the questions asked, it allows to customize, it allows to individualize the specific requirements of a country or territory, how the progressive improvement will be. And there, productive processes in our country, in our region, both aquaculture and livestock or terrestrial animals, have over 70% of small producers where biosecurity is even more challenging due to the conditions of limited access to financial resources to fund these practices, and above all, something that we will have to discuss next time, how to raise awareness, how to communicate with small producers. These are very well strategies, very well designed strategies for those of producers with the veterinarian teams. But how can we reach small producers, which is the bulk in our region, and those involved in this productive system? So raising awareness, risk communication, that can favor the implementation of biosecurity practices. So let me close by saying that this progressive process of biosecurity not necessarily should be under one single guideline. Each country is implementing customized approaches. What we want to do with this common platform is to facilitate the exchange of knowledge, above all, promoting the cooperation among countries and territories, which is so necessary to improve from producers towards a public policy administrators and decision makers. Thank you again for joining us, each one of the speakers, the chair, the organizing team, and of course the attendees for joining this webinar. Thank you very much. Thank you, Andres, for these final thoughts, these final remarks that will serve as food for thought. We'd like to thank our speakers for your time and for helping us to understand the challenges, but also the paths that can help us to include biosecurity in our productive system. But to thank our speakers and each and every one in the session for your active participation in the webinar, in our social and the social networks and web and social media and the websites. Remember, Eventos FAO Americas, and there you will find this program. Thank you. Have a good